19 people died the day before due to a terrorist attack in Russia. 105 people were injured. Most victims in Kyiv and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, 195 were damaged. 3 healthcare facilities, all in the capital, were damaged by rocket fire from the occupiers. Minister of Health Viktor Lyashko informed. He emphasized, the healthcare system and emergency medical assistance work in all regions of Ukraine. Medical facilities where there is no electricity are equipped with generators.
Andrii Yusov, representative of the press service of the Main Intelligence Department of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, is in direct contact with us. Hello to Andrii. Good afternoon. Glory to Ukraine. Are the details known to Ukrainian intelligence? How was it prepared? This is probably one of the most massive attacks on peaceful cities in all of Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Counting chronologically, where did the rockets come from, or were they just rockets? Such details are known. The preparation was carried out for quite a long time. More than 1 month. Missiles flew from the Black Sea, from the Caspian Sea, from the territory of the Russian Federation, if we are talking about missile strikes. Unmanned aerial vehicles. Shahed 136 drones. They are from Belarus, from the territory of temporarily occupied Crimea. Preparations were made for a long time, but the final decision was made on the night of October 9 to 10. We must understand that this is mostly not a military operation. It is a terrorist act. This is a political act of intimidation. First of all, the civilian population, the intimidation of Ukrainians as a whole, and, probably, our international allies and partners. This attempt failed. This is a great disaster and drama. Once again, civilians have died. I want to remind you that these are primarily just civilians. This is a mother who took her child to kindergarten. These are just people who went to work in their cars during rush hour. These are not military objectives. The military infrastructure suffered the least from yesterday's massive missile strike. Civilian objects, civil infrastructure, certainly energy infrastructure were the most affected. This is a sign of terrorism. Russia is a terrorist state and Putin is the leader of a terrorist state. We can state that yesterday the whole world saw the effective operation of Ukrainian air defense systems. Ukrainian air defense systems are basically Soviet weapons. Basically, this is still the case. Despite this, more than 60% of air targets were hit. Intelligence provided early warning. Air defenses also worked effectively. Also, the police, the state emergency service. All those who corrected the consequences of damage. Undoubtedly, energy workers. Together with the emergency services, they are still fighting today. Ukraine persevered. Ukraine did not lie down. Ukraine is not paralyzed. Ukraine continues to liberate its territories. The whole world has become convinced that Russia is a terrorist state.
Mr. Andrii, we all think about such a thing. Should we prepare for such threats in the near future, in your opinion?
First of all, yesterday's massive shelling reminded us all. Every air alert signal is serious. You can't take it lightly. Since February 24, every alarm we have is not educational, but combat. What, unfortunately, residents of, for example, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, and Mykolaiv have recently become accustomed to. Take air raid alarms seriously. Residents of other cities, fortunately, have felt less of such threats recently. Yesterday we saw that all of Ukraine must be mobilized and respond adequately to these threats. But as for intensity and mass, of course, such massive missile strikes are more likely to be excluded. With such intensity, the enemy will not be able to constantly bombard the territory of Ukraine. Moreover, it can no longer effectively replenish the stocks of missiles, especially high-precision weapons, and produce them in sufficient quantities. We can say that part of the military in the Russian Federation is categorically against this political terrorist action. Because this is a senseless development of one's own missile reserves. Ukraine persevered. What did Russia get, except shame? The Russians announced 150 missile launches over Ukraine. Then I have a question. Where are all the others? Were they stolen on the approach? Or did they miss the flight? There is very important information. Of course, we will not name names and combat units. Separate military personnel of the Russian Federation contacted Ukraine and passed on information. It was said that they cannot stop it completely, but some of the missiles will not fly towards the target, but into the field, conditionally speaking. In the end, it was. I think that with each passing day of such a senseless war, the number of Russian elites, both military and political, who will shun Putin and try to save their lives will increase. The criminals, who were recently joined by General Surovikin, who led the occupying forces in Ukraine. He was the ideologue of yesterday's mass rocket strike. They will end up in the dock. They will be held accountable for their war crimes against the civilian population. Mr. Andrii would like to talk about the prerequisites for these rocket attacks. Let's rewind a little. Let's recall the address of the head of the Russian Federation, the biggest criminal. Terrorist number 1 Vladimir Putin in a video address. He said that a missile attack on peaceful cities of Ukraine is a response. The response to Ukraine's attempt to carry out 3 terrorist attacks at the Kursk NPP. This is for trying to undermine Turkish Stream. How real are such Russian operations under a foreign flag, in your opinion? In order to maximally promote Putin's theses about the terrorist methods of Kyiv. Absolutely real, and they are constantly coming to life. Russian propaganda, especially since the 14th year, has been conducting operations under a foreign flag. We saw a lot of stories about how, apparently, some Ukrainian nationalists or representatives of the special services prepared various measures, even terrorist attacks on the territory of the Russian Federation. They showed us the actors. Or people who were forced to say certain things. This is Putin's standard practice. Of course, Ukraine is not a terrorist state. Ukraine is a democratic, European country. We are not at war with civilians and civilians. We defend our territory and liberate our own territory. This is the fundamental difference between us and terrorists from the Russian Federation. Putin can blame Ukraine for various things, but the world knows the truth. He knows the truth about yesterday's attacks and about the prerequisites for these actions. Until February 24, when there was also a massive missile attack on Ukraine, there were no northerly flows. And everything was fine with the Crimean Bridge. Regarding the Crimean Bridge, and the missile attack that took place after the incident with this bridge, we can recall how Putin came to power in the first place. First there were explosions in apartment buildings, and the destruction of his compatriots, Russians. And then it was used as an excuse to suppress the independent Chechen Republic, Ichkeria. The methods do not change. But this time there is a difference. The whole civilized and free world knows the truth. And together with Ukraine, it protects our freedom and democratic values. Mr. Andrii, let's talk about Belarus.
What is the latest information regarding the deployment of the so-called regional group in Belarus? Can you conclude that Lukashenko has finally decided to introduce Belarusian troops into a full-scale war? No. We cannot draw such conclusions.
Putin is trying to further involve Lukashenko and persuade him to fully participate in this bloody operation. He encourages Lukashenko to participate in a ground operation against Ukraine. Lukashenko is avoiding this so far. As of today, there are no mobilization measures, regrouping or actions near the border. If the situation changes, Ukrainian intelligence, our partners and allies will know about it and will be informed. We understand that the scenarios may be different and Ukraine is ready for these different scenarios. Now we can state otherwise. Lukashenko continues to help Putin in a certain way. But this is not participation in a ground operation. This is not a full-fledged war on the part of Belarus. As of October 10, 32 Iranian Shahed 136 drones were delivered to the territory of Belarus. By October 14, another 8 Shahed 136 should be delivered to the territory of Belarus. Belarus actively helps Russia with the supply of weapons and ammunition. The Russian army now has an urgent need for this. This is one of the signs of a crisis situation for Russians. Part of the mobilized Russians are being prepared to be placed on the territory of Belarus. These are challenges not only for Ukraine, they are challenges for Belarus itself. Because, in fact, this is an increase in the Russian occupation corps on the territory of Belarus. This is a challenge for Lukashenko as well. Because those Russian bayonets can be turned against him. Thank you. Andrii Yusov, a representative of the press service of the Main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, was in touch with us.